How's it going, gamers? My name is Michael SK, and welcome back to Higurashi When They Cry, Chapter 6. In the last episode, we got a little bit more background, or a little bit more of the gaps filled in with Rena's backstory, or her past, to be more specific. She is, I mean, we knew her to be a little loose in the head. She's got a screw loose in the head, for sure. A little cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, if you will. And that's totally fine. Who isn't in this world, you know? But wowzers, did she go through some stuff? I really don't know how else to summarize it other than she was having delusions to the point where she was starting to rip at her skin, cut herself open, and tried to get blood out of her because she saw maggots. She thought that she saw and felt something that wasn't there. And then saw Oyashir Osama, because yes, he's real apparently. Maybe, actually, I don't even know if that's a joke anymore. But yeah, that's kind of the bulk of what happened in the last episode. And it was kind of pointed out by a little bit of myself and from the commenters that it seems like a lot of the events, or not a lot, but some of the events here in Chapter 6 are mirroring events that we saw in Chapter 1. Probably why I was asked, hey, what do you think about Chapter 1? When I was kind of jumping into this chapter. It's kind of coming together a little bit. So we'll see what this tip is about, and we will continue on with the story. This is the lunch takeout list, whatever that entails. Attention, Kuroda Mental Clinic. I hopefully said that somewhat correctly. Hello. To get straight to the point, we can assume that this is an acute case of post-traumatic stress disorder. Good old PTSD. The patient is subject to tremendous stress because of her parents' sudden divorce and being forced to choose to live with either her mother or her father. Furthermore, the patient firmly believes that she was responsible for her parents' divorce, which further drives her to self-mutilation. The patient's largest shock stems from a sense of betrayal of her own household, which she believed was an absolute safe haven. Henceforth, there is a high possibility that the patient will resort to psychological defense measures to protect her family. For example, she might feel high disdain for any person of the opposite sex who approaches her father. She might feel uncomfortable about having other people in her home. She may also display eccentric behavior in order to keep people away from it. As an example of the latter, there are reported cases of patients unconsciously bringing home garbage. This is really hitting home, isn't it? It's highly important that the patient remains in close communication with her father. By deepening the communication between the two of them, it'll strengthen their family bond and loosen up her anxiety. Since the patient only shows signs of an acute syndrome in this case, there's a very good chance that she'll recover within 3 months with her father's support and proper medication. However, it's common for a patient who seemed to have recovered to have a sudden reoccurrence or a flashback even after 10 years. Her father is still fairly young, and there's still a chance that he could remarry. However, seeing an unfamiliar member of the opposite sex through remarriage could trigger a flashback in the patient, which may lead to avoidance behavior or hyper-awareness. Please explain this part thoroughly to the father in order for him to understand the recovery process. Should the father decide to remarry, it's recommended that he should hold off in telling the patient until she reaches the age where she's capable of living independently. Also, the cause of the patient's psychosomatic self-mutilating behavior, delusional parasitosis, seems to be its own culture-bound syndrome. The patient blindly believes that leaving her home village will cause a curse, and that this curse was the cause of her parents' divorce. We believe this is a subconscious defensive mechanism to reduce her mental trauma by shifting the blame from herself to her village's curse. According to the patient's statement, the culture of her home village is extremely strict and exclusive. The patient believes that there's no way to be saved from the curse other than by going back to the village, as the curse will continue as long as she lives in her current environment. Through this, we see an inclination of schizophrenia, oh boy, and believe the chances are high that the patient will continue to alter their perceived reality. Schizophrenia, a case where patients' personalities are reduced, causing altered perceptions of reality and delusions. Her delusion about the maggots dwelling in her blood is a perfect example, and it's also the cause of her psychosomatic self-mutilating behavior. When a delusion involves psychosomatic self-mutilating behavior, it's extremely dangerous, you don't say. I highly recommend for the father to move back to the village if he's financially capable. Allowing her to live with relatives in the village might also work. If such a strong belief can induce symptoms, such as self-mutilation, then there might be other cases similar to this one. Perhaps prior medical files that document similar culture-bound syndromes may be available at a large medical institution in her local area. It'll then be possible to provide better and more accurate mental care for the patient by obtaining these case files. This B5 size letter was with a bunch of memos. The following was on the back side of the letter. What the fuck? God damn it. Okay, well, I was wondering how the tip of the, I was wondering, I'm like, what the fuck does this have to do about a takeout list? But okay, that kind of made sense. So, I never really, considered schizophrenia being a thing to consider here. I'd like to say that Keiichi has some sort of mental thing going on, probably nothing severe, but, you know, having a different perspective here, going through the Higurashi grind, if you will, has been very helpful in seeing if the events that we're witnessing are somewhat true. I mean, Chapter 3 is still the wonkiest shit I have experienced so far in the series, if I do say so myself. So, having a different perspective helps, because I don't know, maybe he does have a mental issue of some sort that's altering the perspective that us, the viewer, are getting. Now here we are as Rena, kind of going literally into that, so that's great. Fantastic shit. This is bound to be a good time. Shit, who knows what the hell we were experiencing with Shion in Chapter 5 that wasn't actual reality. Like the whole footstep thing that's going on where, oh, Oyashir Osama's following you. Maybe there's something in the air here. About homing ability and homesickness. If you interpret homing ability in a broad sense, you can say that most animals have a homing ability. It's the same with humans. We like to sleep, rest, and eat at a place where we feel comfortable, namely our homes. Your home is to you what nests are to animals. Therefore, we can say that humans have a homing ability as well. First of all, why do animals need nests? The answer is the same for humans. Sleeping, resting, and eating are the essential actions for survival. At the same time, those actions leave one defenseless as well. That's why you need a safe area where you can be defenseless. Everybody knows that not having this safe area results in a high level of stress. When you move an animal to a new environment, it naturally becomes stressed. When you force a person to live in a foreign land where they aren't comfortable, they become greatly stressed as well. Everybody knows that this kind of stress is called homesickness. The Japanese don't know much about homesickness. We defined it as mental weakness, and we neglected to treat it for a long period of time. However, homesickness has a very long history. In Europe's Middle Ages, people believed that it wasn't a mental, but rather a physical disease. People also believed that out of nowhere, the Swiss got the disease the most. The Swiss, you see, were known to be an ethnic group that worked away from home in that era. They lived far away from their homes. There were no telephones at that time, so they couldn't even hear their families' voices for ages and ages. It's easy to imagine that the young Swiss workers got homesick while working in a strange land. These Swiss who got homesick wanted to go home, but they couldn't because of their jobs. The conflict made them weak physically and mentally. Some of them went crazy and tried to escape from their reality by committing suicide or running away. The Swiss at the time were very superstitious, and many folk remedies and occult-like treatments to prevent homesickness went around. Since going home was the only treatment, they must have called it a fatal disease. But it really isn't one, of course. Specifically, homesickness is a sign of that human homing instinct. Your brain desires to go back to your safe area, namely your home. At first, your brain makes you remember the happy memories of your home, and it urges you to go home in a natural way. But when reasons stop you from achieving your desire, your brain starts sending unnatural signals to your body. As a result, your body gets weak, and that makes it more difficult for you to live in a strange land. In the end, you have to bend reason in order to achieve your desire to go home. So homesickness is born from our homing instincts. And the stronger one's homing instinct is, the stronger their homesickness. The strength of that homing instinct varies from individual to individual and depends on the environment in which those individuals live. When your home is safe and the environment you live in is dangerous, your homing instinct grows stronger. On the other hand, when the environment you live in is safer than your homing instinct becomes very weak. Safety isn't the only element that affects its strength. Cultural aspects affect it too. The many customs demanding families to return home for major events varies with each region, so your birthplace's culture also alters the strength of your homing instinct. Amongst those regions, the transcendents of Onigafuchi village were believed to have an excessively strong homing instinct. The people of Onigafuchi forbade their fellows from ever leaving. Many believe this was the effect of the elitism and sense of purity I already mentioned before. People today still strongly believe that Oyashir-Osama puts his curse on you if you break his rule and abandon the village. This superstition can be interpreted as homesickness. If homesickness is directly proportional to one's homing instinct, then the exaggerated expression curse would signify the strength of that homesickness and also their homing instinct. I can assume that they hated the outside world and created an insular society precisely because of their powerful homing ability. Unfortunately, there's no way to measure the strength of the homing ability that the primitive people of Onigafuchi had. It was so strongly forbidden to leave the village that nobody left long enough to get homesick. However, after the Meiji era, things changed. The sacredness of Onigafuchi dwindled with the efforts of modernization. Many young people started longing for city life, and some people were forced to leave the village to get a job. As a result, villagers started venturing outside the village borders. That was when the transcendents of Onigafuchi realized how strong their homing ability was for the first time. The residents of Hinamizawa got extremely homesick. After a while, people started to call this homesickness the curse of Oyashir-Osama. It became rumored that a person who left the village to get a job in a strange land was cursed, that he went crazy and died, and people who had left the village started coming back to either it or the nearby town. Their homesickness and their homing ability were very strong because of their culture. It's reasonable to think that these were cultivated by the unique religion in Hinamizawa, namely the cult of Oyashir-Osama. From the moment they were born, they were taught the rules of Oyashir-Osama. They must have felt guilty about leaving the village unconsciously. As a result, they considered their homesickness to be the curse of Oyashir-Osama. I'm not sure if their homesickness got stronger because of the rules of Oyashir-Osama, or if they made the rules of Oyashir-Osama because their homesickness got stronger. I don't know which came first. I got tired of reading such small print, and lay down on the floor on my back. The true identity of the curse of Oyashir-Osama is homesickness? Mio-san believed my story and she let me read these scrapbooks. That's why I expected to find something interesting. But what it's saying is that the answer to all is homesickness, which many doctors told me so many times at counseling. I'm a little upset. The word homesickness can't explain the extraordinary experience I had. I saw Oyashir-Osama come down to me from a bright light in the bathroom. I saw the dusky red nasty maggots come out of my blood vessels. This scrapbook doesn't explain any of that. I don't understand how Mio-san was going to explain the cloud of maggots. Maybe she didn't have any explanation to that to begin with. Was it just a delusion? I flipped through one of the other scrapbooks Mio-san let me borrow, looking for an explanation of the maggots I saw, and then I found it. It had the exact title I was looking for. About maggots and the curse of Oyashir, Osama. Well, that's very specific. In the Meiji era, a group of villagers were on their way back to Hinamizawa, and they started discussing a rumor about a weird disease. They said that maggots started crawling out of the wounds of a person who left Hinamizawa, and that the maggots ate the person's body from the inside. The Shinto priest of the Furude shrine at that time explained that the weird disease was a sign of the curse of Oyashir, Osama. According to tradition, the Shinto priest showed the villagers an ancient scroll, and he told them that the story of the maggots had been passed down through the ages. This is what the scroll said. The world, where the demons came from, must be interpreted as the land of death. And the demons in that land of death had to live their lives while being eaten by maggots. The villagers who are of the demon's blood had nothing to worry about as long as they lived in Hinamizawa under the protection of Oyashir, Osama. But once they left Hinamizawa, abandoning that protection, the maggots that had been sleeping in the blood of the demons would start to awaken, and they'd eat their bodies from the inside out. This maggot disease scared the villagers for a while, and they asked the shrine to provide them with protective talismans whenever they had to leave the village on business. This is interesting, as it's similar to the way homesickness was dealt with by the Swiss in the Middle Ages. After the war started, the delusion of the maggot disease faded away, but there remained a custom to send talismans to families that lived away from Hinamizawa. The talismans had the word maggot on them. But the most interesting part about all this is that the residents of Hinamizawa didn't know about the maggot disease until the rumors began. I thought that their unconscious worship made those people think of the homesickness as a curse. So this case of the previously unknown maggot disease directly contradicted the research I had done so far. It's natural to think that the people who were on their way back to the village were lost in a mass delusion because they strongly believed in the curse, and that the Shinto priest took advantage of their state of panic to instill a deeper faith in them. But I'm not fully convinced that it was merely a coincidence that this mass delusion matched with the story in the old picture scroll. I wonder if it's possible to see maggots in a wound without having the prerequisite knowledge when a person is cursed by Oyashir, Osama. I wish Oyashir Osama would put his curse on someone I could study. I'd love to see those maggots coming out of someone. I felt as if Mio-san was here and making that request of me. I remember, when she gave me the scrapbook, she said that I might be the only one who could understand them. I felt good for just a moment, because I found out that the maggots weren't a delusion. No, I think they are. But at the same time, it destroyed my excuse that it was a delusion. The maggots weren't a delusion, they were there. All of a sudden, my wrists, elbows, inner thighs, and neck started itching. I felt the urge to cut open open a blood cell, but I quietly held it down. I remembered that Mio-san looked very serious when I talked about the maggots. She must have thought it was creepy, but so did I. And so did I. While I was crying because nobody believed me, a part of me didn't want to believe that my body was filled with those creepy things. I think a part of me wanted to believe that it was a delusion. But now I know it wasn't. It wasn't a delusion. There are some people who had the same experience. Maggots in the demon's blood will awaken when you lose the protection of Oyashir, Osama. In other words, they may not awaken under the protection of Oyashir, Osama, but all the villagers still have the maggots in them without knowing it. People of the demon's blood are people who have the creepy maggots in their bodies. I tried not to jump to conclusions and flip the pages again. I unconsciously looked for something related to maggots. About parasites in control of the host. The maggot disease made me think about something. Is it possible to say that the extremely strong homesickness of Hinamizawa was an infectious disease caused by some kind of parasite? I'm not trying to connect the maggots they saw with parasites. I'm trying to think about the possibility that their culture, or their religion, might be associated with an infectious disease. Many infectious diseases are caused unintentionally by parasites. A parasite's host is literally its home. It wants to live within the host's body for as long as it can. The best way to do that is to coexist with the host without the host knowing it. Hence the word, really. But some parasites try to control their hosts and use them for prosperity. For example, some parasites have an ability to control their host in order to force them to be eaten by a superior host. A typical example is, the dicrocoeli, whatever the fuck. Oh, there's another long ass word here. I can't pronounce this. I'm too stupid. It uses snails or ants as intermediate hosts, and it forces them to move to the upper side of vegetation so that it's easier for a superior host to consume it. One parasite that controls more complicated animals is called, god damn it, Toxoplasma gondii. Well, that's easy. That was a lot easier to say. It uses mice as intermediate hosts, with the superior hosts being cats. This parasite makes a mouse lose its fear of cats in order to increase its chance of getting eaten, so that the parasite can live within a cat instead. Wow, okay. There are parasites that choose hosts at random. The Rabies Virus is commonly known for that, and it lives and breeds in the brain of a host, and it moves into the host's saliva through the salivary glands. It makes the host extremely aggressive in order to make it bite things randomly, so that it in turn can move into other hosts through the saliva. And that's what rabies does. Many parasites have a similar ability to control hosts to their benefit. The examples I used above are about parasites that move into other hosts to prosper, but I think there must be some kind of parasite that controls its hosts in order to have a comfortable environment in which to live. I want to try to connect this theory to the abnormal homing ability and homesickness of the Onigafuchi residents. Let's say there's some kind of parasite that exists in Hinamizawa, and that it lives within all of the villagers' bodies. For the parasite, Hinamizawa is the most comfortable environment to live in, so it gives the hosts a strong homing ability in order to make them stay in Hinamizawa. Furthermore, it causes the hosts to get homesick whenever they ignore this homing ability and try to leave. Parasites need hosts in which to live. It's convenient for them if their hosts build a community in the environment where it feels comfortable. This theory makes it easier for me to explain the mysteries I described earlier. The Transcendents of Onigafuchi knew about the existence of this parasite. They knew that, as hosts to the parasites, they couldn't live outside of the village. That's why they created a culture and rules that prohibited contact with the outside world. It also explains why people acted so abnormal during the dam conflict. So, the demons that came out of the swamp in the legend of Oyashir Osama can be interpreted as the mass spread of the parasite. The story about the demons attacking the villagers must be a metaphor for the behavior of the infected villagers who were controlled by the parasite. And this theory is just too crazy. I should have just laughed about it, but I felt bad for Mio-san, so I decided not to. Hinamizawa is controlled by a parasite? You could use that theory to explain how the maggots came out of me. I felt a little bit dizzy. I was so confused that a part of me thought it was ridiculous, and another part of me thought it was more convincing than any curse. But Mio-san was probably erased because she wrote these scrapbooks. If so, the contents of these scrapbooks must be something that they can't ignore. They tried to get all of her scrapbooks, and consign them to oblivion. What if they notice some of her scrapbooks are missing? I felt a chill running through my spine. I have to keep it a secret that I have these scrapbooks, and I'll have to try to understand more about their contents. I remember Mio-san told me that the three families are behind the series of the mysterious deaths, and that they're trying to resurrect the cult of Oyashir Osama. According to the theory I just read, the parasite must be trying to maintain the current environment of Hinamizawa. The healthiest environment for it is a completely closed village, just like the primitive Onigafuchi. It must be very comfortable for the parasite if no hosts go outside the village. They don't even like that the villagers often leave the village to go shopping. That means the parasite would try to goad the hosts into resurrecting the cult of Oyashir Osama. Huh? I remember that there was an article in the scrapbook saying that the demon's blood runs thickest in the three families. That would mean that they have a larger amount of the parasite in them than the other villagers, and that they're under its control. The three families seem to be planning to bring the village back to the Onigafuchi era. Reviving the Watanagashi festival after the dam conflict can be interpreted as their desire to revive the faith that it had started to fade away in the Meiji area. Era? Ugh. The three families, especially the Sonozaki family, have a great influence over the region and the public organizations. What's going on here? I thought that this be a poorly written theory, but the pieces fit together one after another. I've never played a jigsaw puzzle as crazy as this. I felt my brain swirling due to this absurd theory. A part of me thought that this was ridiculous, and another part of me thought I might be about to expose an unbelievable truth. When I tried to look into the center of it, I felt as if I was going to fall into the whirlpool and drown. I'll have to devote myself to reading more seriously. There must be some truth to this. It caused misfortune and made my life miserable after I moved to Ibaraki. I might be able to find the truth, including the cause of my parents' divorce and my desperate behavior. Right then, I heard a knock on the door, all of a sudden, scaring me. I hid the scrapbooks under a cushion.
Reina, 電話が来てるぞ。
電話？こんな時間に？誰だろう？
本屋さんからだぞ。
Oh, god damn it.
本の取り寄せとか頼んだのか？
I already know who this is. It's literally mirroring how she got in contact with Keiichi.
沖宮書房の大石さんって人からだ。
Ugh, god damn. I really needed a drink after all that one. I hate it when there's just a section of the game that is nothing but that. God damn. Okay. It looks like we're following Keiichi now. I'm actually going to end the episode here a little earlier than my usual timings, but yeah, my throat is fucking raw after that one. So I'm just gonna cool it here. Next time, hopefully I don't have to talk as much. I don't even have the energy to really speak my mind here, but I will try just a little bit. Yeah, maybe actually I don't even have my thoughts together right now. This is very strange because it's trying to connect more of a possible reality to the situation and less of relying on fiction or like magical sci-fi bullshit. It's trying its hardest, these theories, and it's always seemed like that with this woman. Why am I forgetting her name all of a sudden? Takano? Yeah, let's go with that. It always seems like she tries to get some sort of idea or theory running that kind of sticks with you for the rest of the chapter. She's always there just to say something, and it kind of sticks with you, which is kind of concerning. But I don't really know if I can buy the whole parasite thing, but it is very fascinating to think about if you kind of want to jump more into like a possible reality of the situation rather than relying on, oh, it's a curse. I don't think it's a parasite, but my something's in the air comment might not be too far off. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But thank you all for watching this episode. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, be sure to leave a like, subscribe, all that fancy jazz. I will see you guys in the next one. Take it easy.